His hand snapped shut around her wrist just as she turned to leave. Strong, sudden, and impossible to ignore. So why did she not pull away? The basin nearly slipped from Lila's hands as warm water trembled against its rim. The fire behind her cracked low, throwing shadows across the timber walls of Iron Ridge Ranch. She stood still, caught in his grip, feeling the weight of it. Not force, not anger. Something else she couldn't yet name. Gideon Hale opened his eyes then, not a trace of sleep in them, and for a second, the whole room seemed to hold its breath. Outside, the wind pressed hard against the shutters, and somewhere in the yard a loose chain struck wood in steady rhythm. Lila could have stepped back, could have said something. Instead, she stayed where she was, meeting his gaze without lowering her own. And that was when the silence between them shifted into something neither of them had planned. Tell me, would you have pulled away or stayed? The wind came down hard off the ridge that night, sliding through every seam in the timber walls of Iron Ridge Ranch. It carried the kind of cold that settled into bone and stayed there. Outside, the corral gate creaked slow and steady, one loose hinge tapping like a clock that had forgotten how to keep time. Inside, the fire had burned low. Gideon Hale lay stretched across the long chair near the hearth, one arm resting over his chest, boots still on, coat half unbuttoned. To anyone passing the doorway, he looked like a man who had finally given in to sleep. A long day in the cold could do that, but his eyes were not closed all the way. He watched the fire through the narrowest slit, counting the rise and fall of the embers, listening. The house had its own sounds, old wood settling, wind pushing against shutters, a loose latch tapping somewhere down the hall. He knew every one of them. So when a new sound came, soft and measured, he heard it before the door even opened. Footsteps, careful ones. The door eased inward without a creak. A small line of colder air slipped in with it. Then she stepped through. Lila Mae Carter carried a shallow basin in both hands, steam lifting from the surface in thin white curls. The lamplight caught along the rim, glinting faint against the dull metal. She paused just inside the room, as if measuring the distance, or maybe the man. He didn't move. She let the door fall shut behind her, slow enough that the latch didn't click. Then she crossed the floor, her boots quiet against the worn boards. The hem of her work dress brushed her ankles. There was a faint scent of soap and something herbal, rosemary maybe, or pine resin. She set the basin down on the small table beside him. For a moment, she just stood there, not waiting, not calling his name, just standing, looking at him the way someone looks at a storm they've learned not to disturb. Then she reached out. Her fingers hovered over his hand first, not touching, just close enough to feel the heat, or the lack of it. His skin was rough, cracked in places where the cold had bitten through. A working man's hands, a man who didn't stop when the weather turned. She exhaled once, quiet. Then she picked up his hand. Gideon felt it the second her skin met his, smaller than his by half. Warm, steady. He kept his breathing slow. She lowered his hand into the water. Steam curled up around his knuckles, and for a second, his body wanted to react, to pull back, to flex. But he held still, let it happen. Her movements were careful, not timid. She didn't rush, didn't treat him like glass either. She worked the water around his fingers, turning his wrist just enough to reach the places where the skin had split. The cloth in her other hand moved in slow passes, soaking, cleaning. No wasted motion, no performance. She didn't look at his face again, not once. When she lifted his hand out, she reached into her apron pocket and brought out a small tin. The lid clicked softly as she opened it. The scent deepened, herbs and something faintly bitter, like rendered fat mixed with crushed leaves. She dipped 2 fingers in and began to work it into the cracks. That was where it changed, not the action itself. He'd had men on the trail wrap a hand or pour whiskey over a wound before. This was different, slower, intentional. She pressed the salve into each line, as if she knew what it cost to leave it untreated. He swallowed once, barely. The fire popped behind them, a small, sharp sound. She paused just long enough to glance toward it, then went back to her work. Finished one hand, then the other. When she was done, she didn't step back right away. Instead, she pulled the blanket up from where it had slipped at his side and laid it across him, smoothing it once over his chest. Not lingering, just making sure it held. Then she picked up the basin, turned, and that was when his hand moved. It happened before he decided on it. His fingers closed around her wrist, firm, instinctive. She froze. The basin tipped just slightly, water trembling at the edge but not spilling. For a second, neither of them moved at all. The wind outside pressed harder against the walls, as if trying to get in. Gideon's eyes opened fully. Up close, her face didn't carry surprise the way he expected. There was tension there, yes. A stillness. But not fear. Not the kind that flinched. Just waiting. As if she was giving him the chance to explain something he hadn't meant to say. His grip loosened. He let her go. She didn't pull away fast. Didn't step back in a rush. She simply adjusted her hold on the basin, steadying it, then gave a small nod. Not to him exactly, more to the moment, and walked to the door. No questions. No apology. The door opened, then closed again with the same quiet care. Gideon stayed where he was. The warmth from the water lingered in his hands, deeper than the surface. He flexed his fingers once, testing it, as if to be sure it had really happened. The room felt different now. Not louder, not warmer, just less empty. He looked down at his hands, at the thin sheen of salve worked into the skin, then back toward the door. He hadn't called for her. She hadn't been told. And still, she had come in like that, quiet, steady, as if it were the most ordinary thing in the world to tend to a man who never asked for anything. Gideon leaned his head back against the chair. This time he didn't pretend to sleep. He just stared at the ceiling, listening to the wind, and tried to understand why, for the first time in years, the silence in the house no longer felt like something he owned. It felt like something that had just been crossed, and he wasn't sure how to step back from it. Morning came slow over Iron Ridge Ranch. The sky was pale, almost white, and the frost had settled thick along the fence rails. Gideon stepped out before the sun cleared the ridge, pulling his coat tight as he crossed the yard. The boards under his boots gave a low, hollow sound, same as always, but something in him wasn't. He flexed his hands once as he walked. The skin no longer split when he bent his fingers. The salve had done its work. He hadn't asked for it. Still, it stayed with him. Inside the barn, the smell of hay and leather held steady. One of the younger hands had left a saddle half cleaned on a rail. Gideon ran a thumb along the strap. Oiled. Not well, but enough. He finished the job without thinking. By the time he came back to the house, smoke was already rising from the kitchen chimney. The door stood open just enough to let the heat drift out. He paused on the threshold, not stepping in right away. Lila stood at the counter, sleeves rolled just past her wrists, hair pulled back. A cast-iron skillet sat over the stove, and the smell of coffee carried through the room. She moved from one task to another without stopping, checking the pot, slicing bread, glancing once at a folded receipt beside the flour sack. She didn't look up when he entered. "Coffee's on," she said, like she had known he was there before the door moved. He poured himself a cup. Black. Always black. The mug was chipped along the rim. He turned it once in his hand, then set it down and reached for the bread instead. It had been cut even, no waste. He ate standing. She wiped her hands on a cloth and stepped past him to the back table. There was a ledger open there. The ranch books. He had left them closed the night before. Now they weren't. "You moved those," he said. She didn't look up. "Needed to check the feed numbers. Last delivery came up short." He took a step closer. The columns were straight, clean. Numbers corrected in a tight, careful hand. Not guessing, knowing. "You know books," he said. "I know how to keep one from lying," she answered. That was all. He stayed there a moment longer than needed. Then he picked up his mug again and walked out. The days settled into a pattern after that. Not the same as before. Close, but not the same. Lila worked through the house and the yard like she had always been there. She mended a torn sleeve on his coat without asking. Fixed a loose nail on the porch step that had been catching for weeks. Once he found her in the barn, checking the tack with the same eye he used. Quiet, exact. She didn't ask for permission. She didn't wait to be told. And she didn't linger when he was near. If he came into a room, she finished what she was doing and moved on. Not hurried, not afraid. Just careful. Like she had drawn a line and meant to keep it. By midweek, word had started to travel. Gideon rode into town with a list folded in his pocket. Salt, lamp oil, a length of wire for the east fence. The road into Red Hollow cut through open land, wind dragging dust along the ground even in winter. Silas Boone's store sat at the corner, same as always. Window fogged from the stove inside, a few men leaning against the post out front. Silas saw him before he stepped in. "Hale," he said, voice easy. "Heard you took on help for the season." Gideon set his list on the counter. "Needed it." Silas nodded, slow. "From Kansas, they say." Gideon didn't answer. Silas reached for the salt, weighed it out. "Funny thing about Kansas, folks come from there carrying more than just luggage." Gideon's hand rested flat on the counter. Still. Silas went on, casual. "Name like Carter. Might ring a bell in the wrong place. Lawsuit, maybe. Or something close enough to one." The room had gone quiet around them. Not silent. Just listening. Gideon took the sack of salt when it was set down. Paid in exact coin. Didn't ask a question. On his way out, one of the men tipped his hat. Not friendly. Not unfriendly either. Just taking measure. The ride back felt longer. When he reached the ranch, Lila was out by the line, hanging washed cloth where the wind could catch it. White against the gray sky. She had a ledger tucked under one arm, the edge of it marked with a strip of cloth like a bookmark. He slowed his horse as he came up. "You been to town?" he asked. She nodded once, not stopping her work. "Yesterday, for flour." He studied her for a second. The way she kept her hands moving, the way she didn't turn to face him fully. "They talk," he said. "They always do." That was it. No defense, no explanation. He waited, thinking she might add something. She didn't. The wind lifted one of the cloths loose from the line. It snapped once, sharp. She caught it with one hand, pinned it back, smoothed it down like it had never come free. Gideon watched her do it. Then he turned his horse and rode toward the barn without another word. That night, the house was quiet again. Same fire. Same chair. He didn't lie down this time. He sat, hands resting on his knees, listening for footsteps that didn't come. The door stayed closed. The wind moved through the cracks, steady and cold, and for the first time since she arrived, he noticed the distance she had put between them. Not with words, but with everything else. The sky turned before noon. It came in low and fast, a gray wall rolling over the ridge like something alive. The air swooped first, sharp, dry. Then the wind followed, cutting across the open land and driving loose snow into the fence lines. Gideon stood in the yard, watching it come. One glance was enough. He turned toward the barn. "Bring them in," he told the two hands working the far gate. "All of them. Now." They moved quick. The cattle were already restless, shifting in tight circles, heads low against the wind. Gideon grabbed a coil of rope and swung into the saddle in one clean motion. No hesitation. No second look toward the house. "East slope," he said over his shoulder. "Some didn't make it back last night." No one argued. He rode out before the wind hit full. The first gust slammed into him halfway up the rise, stealing his breath for a second. Snow came sideways, stinging against his face. The path he knew by memory blurred under white. Behind him, the ranch faded. Inside the house, Lila stood at the kitchen window, one hand braced against the frame. She watched the last shape of horse and rider disappear into the storm. The door rattled once under a stronger gust. She didn't move right away. The stove hissed behind her. A pot boiled over, sending a thin line of water down the side. She turned, lifted it off the flame, set it aside without looking. Her hands moved on their own. Then she went still again. On the table lay the ledger, open, a line half written where she had stopped. She closed it. Time passed, not measured, just felt. The wind grew louder, the kind that filled the whole house, pressing against the walls like it meant to push them in. The other hands came back one by one, stamping snow off their boots, speaking low. No one said his name. No one needed to. By late afternoon, the yard was gone under white. Lila stepped outside once. The cold hit hard enough to make her eyes water. The tracks Gideon had left were already gone. The world beyond the gate was nothing but moving snow. She stood there longer than she should have, then went back in. Night came early. Lanterns were lit. Doors barred. The wind didn't ease. At the far end of the table, one of the hands said, "He'll wait it out. He knows the ridge." No one answered. Lila set a cup down harder than she meant to. The sound cut through the room, then faded. She wiped her hands on her apron and walked to the rack by the door, took down a heavier coat, the thick one lined with wool, not hers. She held it a moment, then put it on. "Where you going?" one of the men asked. She didn't look back. "To find him." "That's no road out there," he said. "You won't see 10 feet." "I don't need to see 10, she answered. "I need to follow what's left." He shook his head. "You'll get lost." She tied the scarf tighter around her neck. "Then I won't go far enough to lose him." She stepped out before anyone could stop her. The cold closed in at once. The gate was half buried. She forced it open, the wood scraping against packed snow. The wind pushed against her, hard enough to stagger her first step. She leaned into it and kept going. There was nothing to follow, no clear track, no path, just memory. She moved slow at first, testing the ground with each step. The slope rose under her boots, uneven, hidden. Once she slipped, catching herself on one knee, snow soaking through the fabric. She didn't stop. The ridge loomed somewhere ahead, or she told herself it did. Time stretched. Her breath came short, freezing at the edges. The scarf stiffened where it caught moisture. Her hands, even inside gloves, began to numb. Then something broke the white. A shape, dark against the snow. She pushed toward it, forcing her legs to move faster. The wind fought her every step. It was the horse first. Down on its side, half buried, flank barely moving. The saddle twisted. The reins dragged loose. "Easy," she said, though the wind took the word. She moved past it. Gideon lay beyond, near the edge of a shallow cut in the land. One arm bent under him, the other outstretched, as if he had tried to reach something and missed. She dropped beside him. His coat was stiff with ice. Snow had gathered along his shoulders, his hat gone. His face was pale under the frost, eyes closed. She pressed her hand to his neck. There. Faint. But there. Gideon, she said, louder this time. No answer. She pulled at his arm, trying to turn him. He didn't move easy. Dead weight, the kind that didn't help. She looked back once toward where the ranch should have been. Nothing but white. Then she reached for the rope at her side. It took time. More than she had. She looped it around his chest, under his arms, bracing it tight, tied the other end around her own waist, checked the knot twice with numb fingers. "Don't make this harder," she muttered, though she knew he couldn't hear. Then she stood. The first pull nearly took her down. She leaned forward, putting her weight into it, boots digging into the snow for purchase. The rope went taut. His body shifted an inch, then another. Step, drag, step, drag. The wind howled over them, erasing what little trace they left behind. Snow filled in every mark almost as soon as it was made. She didn't look back again, didn't stop to rest, only moved, slow, steady, like there was no other way. By the time the barn came into view, Lila could barely feel her legs. The lantern by the door had been lit and left hanging low, its glow swallowed by the storm. Shapes moved behind it, men stepping out, voices rising sharp when they saw her. "Over here!" The rope slipped from her numb hands as they reached her. Someone caught Gideon's weight. Another pulled her aside, steadying her when she nearly went down with him. Inside, the air hit warm and thick, too fast, too much. They laid him near the fire in the main room, boots off, coat cut loose where it had frozen stiff. Someone fed the flames until they snapped high and loud. Lila stood back at first, just long enough to see him breathe. Then she moved in. "Cloth," she said, already reaching for the basin. "Not hot. Warm." No one argued. Her hands worked without pause. She wiped the ice from his face, pressed warmth back into his skin a little at a time. When his jaw tightened, she didn't pull away, just stayed steady until it eased again. Hours passed. The storm wore itself down against the walls. The room settled. One by one, the others drifted out, leaving only the fire and the sound of breath. His, shallow at first, then deeper. Lila didn't stay close. She finished what needed doing, then stepped back. Sat in the chair by the window, not the one beside him, far enough that she wouldn't be the first thing he saw. When he woke, it was near dawn. Gideon didn't move right away. His eyes opened slow, unfocused. The fire had burned low again, throwing a dim light across the ceiling. For a moment, he looked like a man trying to place where he was. Then he saw the room, the chair, the rope still coiled on the floor. His head turned. Lila was there, sitting straight, hands folded in her lap, as if she had been waiting for something that might or might not come. "You came out," he said. His voice was rough, not fully there. She didn't answer right away. "You didn't come back," she said instead. That was all. He pushed himself up a little, wincing once before settling. His eyes moved over the room, taking in what had been done. The fire, the water, the cut straps from his coat, then back to her. "You shouldn't have," he said. "I know." Silence followed. It wasn't the same kind as before. This one had weight in it. Something carried and set down between them. He studied her for a moment longer, like he might say something else. He didn't. By midday, word had already made it into town. It traveled faster than the storm had. By the next morning, it had changed shape. Gideon heard it first from one of the hands returning from Red Hollow. Said it careful, like it might break if spoken too loud. They're saying she went out there for more than just you. Gideon didn't ask what that meant. Didn't need to. The rest came easy. That she knew what she was doing. That she had plans. That no one braved a storm like that without expecting something in return. By afternoon, it had settled into something worse. That Gideon Hale, who had kept his house locked tight for years, had let the wrong person in. He rode into town that evening. Not fast. Not slow either. The streets were half mud, half ice. Men stood outside the saloon watching him pass. No one stopped him. No one greeted him. Inside the store, Silas Boone leaned on the counter, same as before. "Hell of a storm," he said. Gideon set down a sack of grain. "You talk too much." Silas smiled thin. "Folks talk when something don't fit right." Gideon didn't raise his voice, didn't step closer. Then they ought to learn the difference between talking and knowing. Silas shrugged, but he didn't say anything else. That was enough. When Gideon rode back, the ranch looked the same as it always had. Smoke from the chimney, light in the kitchen window. But inside, something had shifted. Lila's things were no longer laid out where they had been. The ledger was closed, set aside. Her coat was gone from the hook by the door. He found her in the small room off the kitchen, the one with the narrow bed and the wooden trunk at the foot. Open, clothes folded inside, not hurried, not messy, ready. "You leaving?" he said. She didn't turn. "I was going to tell you in the morning." "You can tell me now." That made her pause, just for a second. Then she closed the lid of the trunk. "I don't stay where every step gets measured by someone else's tongue," she said. "And I don't stay where what I do gets turned into something it isn't." He took a step closer. "You're leaving because of them. I'm leaving because of me." She finally turned then. Her eyes didn't carry anger, not even hurt the way he expected, just a kind of steadiness that didn't bend. "You didn't ask me to come," she said, "and you didn't ask me to go out there. That was my choice. I didn't stop you." "No," she said, "you didn't." That hung there. He could have said more, could have told her none of it mattered, but the words didn't come the way they should have. Instead, he stood there, hands at his sides, watching her tie the last strap across the trunk. "You don't have to leave," he said finally. She looked at him a long moment, then shook her head once. "I do." That night, the house went quiet again. Not the same quiet as before. This one had something missing from it, something that had been there long enough to be noticed when it was gone. Gideon sat by the fire, not lying down this time. He didn't pretend to sleep, didn't listen for footsteps. There weren't any. A week passed without her. Not a long time by the calendar, but long enough for a place like Iron Ridge to show the difference. The kitchen stayed clean, but not in the same way. The ledger sat where he had left it, closed. The fire burned, though no one kept it even through the night. Gideon moved through his days the same as before, up before light, out to the yard, checking fences, counting stock. But there were small things he didn't fix anymore. A loose board by the well stayed loose. The strap on his saddle creaked where it hadn't before. He noticed them. He just didn't reach for them. On the 8th morning, he saddled his horse without calling anyone to ride with him. The road to Red Hollow had thawed just enough to turn to mud. Wagon tracks cut deep into the ground. The sky had cleared, leaving the air sharp and bright in a way that made everything look closer than it was. The town came into view slow, smoke rising straight up from chimneys. The sound of voices carried across the open space before the buildings. It was market day. People moved in clusters along the main street. Wagons lined up with sacks of grain, crates of eggs, bundles of cloth. A man hammered a loose wheel rim back into place. Someone laughed too loud near the saloon doors. Gideon rode straight through the middle of it. He didn't look left or right, didn't slow, until he saw her. Lila stood near the far end of the street, beside a small table set up against the wall of the general store. A few folded cloths lay stacked in front of her. A tin box sat open at the corner. She was speaking to a woman, counting coins into her palm, precise and steady. Same as before, only not his. He stopped his horse 10 yards away. She felt him before she saw him. Her hand paused over the coins. Then she finished the count, closed the woman's fingers around them, and nodded once. When she turned, her eyes didn't widen, didn't drop. They just met his. Gideon swung down from the saddle, tied the reins to the post without looking. Then he walked toward her, each step even, boots leaving dark prints in the wet dirt. The noise around them didn't stop. It just shifted. People watched without pretending not to. He stopped in front of her table, close enough to reach, far enough not to. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he took something from inside his coat. A ledger, worn along the edges, marked with the same strip of cloth she had used. He set it down in front of her, not pushed, not forced, just placed. She's the one kept it from falling apart, he said, voice steady, carrying just enough to reach beyond them. It wasn't loud, but it was clear. A few heads turned. No one laughed. Lila looked down at the ledger. Her fingers didn't touch it right away. She stood there, eyes tracing the edge, the mark, the place where she had last closed it. Then she looked back up at him. "You brought that here for them," she said quietly. He shook his head once. "Brought it for you." He stepped back, not turning, not leaving, just giving her space. The street waited. So did he. Lila reached out then. Not fast, not slow. Her hand rested on the ledger, feeling its weight like it might tell her something she didn't already know. Around them, the world went on. A wagon rolled past. Someone called for change. The blacksmith's hammer rang once in the distance. She lifted the book, held it for a second, then closed her fingers around it. When she moved, it wasn't toward the road south. It was toward him. She didn't look at the people watching, didn't answer the looks or the silence that followed her. She stopped beside him, not behind, not waiting. Beside. Gideon didn't reach for her, didn't take the book from her hands. He just untied the reins and stepped forward, giving her the space to walk with him if she chose. She did. They left the town the same way he had entered, straight through the middle, past the same faces, the same eyes, but this time there was no distance between them. Back at Iron Ridge, the light had started to shift toward evening. The door opened, closed. Inside, the house felt the same again, only different. Lila set the ledger back on the table, opened it, ran her hand once over the page where she had stopped before. Gideon stood by the fire. He didn't lie down, didn't close his eyes. When she brought the basin in later that night, the steam rising the same way it had before, he was already watching. She set it down, reached for his hand. This time, he didn't pretend, didn't wait. He turned his palm toward hers before she could take it. She paused at that, just for a second, then went on. When she finished, she moved to pull the blanket up the way she always had. He caught her wrist again, not sudden, not uncertain. She looked at him, The fire shifted behind them, throwing light across the room. "Stay," he said. "No more than that. No less." Her hand didn't pull away, and this time neither of them let go. The fire burned low, steady and sure, casting a quiet glow across the walls that had once held nothing but silence. Outside, the wind had eased. The ridge stood still under a pale sky, as if the land itself had decided to rest. Gideon didn't speak again that night. He didn't need to. The way his hand stayed where it was said enough. And Lila, she didn't pull away. Not this time. Not because she had nowhere else to go, but because she chose to stay. That was the difference. Somewhere between the storm and the silence that followed, they had both crossed a line neither of them had planned to. Not through force, not through need, but through small things, a basin of warm water, a hand held a moment longer than expected, a decision made when no one was watching. Out here, a man could build a life with his hands, but it took something else to let someone stand beside him in it. And maybe that's the part that stays with you. Not the storm, not the struggle, but the quiet moment when someone could walk away and doesn't. If you had been standing in her place, with everything said and unsaid weighing on you, would you have stayed? And if this story meant something to you, there are more waiting just beyond the next trail. Stories about people who found their way back from places they thought they were lost for good. You're always welcome to ride along.